¿Qué tal, amigos? Stuart here from Spain Speaks with another podcast this week. Again, joined by John, who's been good enough to join me again. John, how are you today?
I'm good, thanks.
Good to hear, good to hear. Have you had a good and prosperous last week?
It's been a good week, yes. Can't complain too much. The weather's changed a bit, so you see I'm jumper now, and even brought my brolly with me today. So.
Yeah, it has changed quite quickly, and I saw the other day that September was the hottest September on record, I think.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, we didn't have any rain. It was sunny throughout the whole month. Normally you get a bit of cloud coming in, but it was a very hot month.
Very hot indeed, and it has changed quite quickly. Been not cold, but not as hot as it was obviously in September, and the rain has come.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that a lot of people don't realise about Madrid. You don't really have much of a spring or an autumn. It's a very quick spring and autumn compared to what you would have back home. So you have a very hot September, and then all of a sudden the temperatures drop quite drastically within a week. You have a few weeks where the temperature's quite nice, not too hot, not too cold, but you'll probably get a fair bit of rain, a bit of cloud, and all of a sudden it just bang, it's like 5 degrees out, and then it gets freezing, and then sometimes you get a bit of snow, and a lot of people just don't realise that we have snow here. It's quite funny.
It does. I haven't seen snow in Rivas for a long time. Have you ever seen snow here?
It's been a couple of years since we've had snow settle in Rivas. I've got to remember, it was about 3 years ago, I think we had a bit of a snowfall and a light covering of snow. It's normally further in the north, around the mountains, you get it. And as you leave Madrid as well. In fact, while I was living in Carabana, I got snowed in twice in 2 years.
Really?
I couldn't even leave the village. They actually closed the roads.
Yeah, yeah. I think another part about living in this part of Spain is it's not really prepared for those extremes. So when it does snow, people are not ready. There always seems to be some type of bad response. I remember last year that people were stuck in their cars overnight on the highway. Do you remember that?
Yeah, that
around
does
Christmas
happen.
time.
Yeah, it was just before Christmas, I think.
I think so.
Yeah. It happens here because they're just not prepared for the really bad weather. You only got to look at yesterday here in Madrid. Not in Rivas, in Madrid. It just fell out of the sky. It was absolutely pouring down of rain, and then the traffic just halts.
What time was that?
It was around about 8 o'clock, maybe 7:30, 8 o'clock, something around
in the evening.
In the evening,
okay.
Yeah. And that's kind of rush hourish in Madrid, and it took my wife an hour to get home from Madrid, where it normally takes 20 minutes. So you can imagine.
Yeah, traffic nightmares.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. And I think we saw yesterday as well, or maybe the day before, that in Majorca, 10 people died in the floods. Did you see that as well?
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's 10 people died, but there's definitely 10 people missing. I think some have died and still 3 unaccounted for, so probably 10 dead, I think.
I think I read today 10 dead, 6 still missing.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's gone up since I saw it.
And apparently a flash flood, and the village or the town that they were living in wasn't able to handle the amount of rain. It went straight through the middle of the city and just took everything with it.
Yeah, I was actually on holiday there last year, just next door.
Oh, really?
In Calle Rajada.
Okay.
It's a lovely part of Majorca, and it's such a shame that it's happened. I believe the actual river burst its banks, which is why there was such a massive flood all of a sudden. And I think there was even 2 British tourists in a taxi that are missing at the moment. I think the taxi driver lost his life as well. They just got caught out completely.
Well, the images that I saw on the television were that it was the typical village that's at the base of a mountain or hills or something. I'm not sure whether it was a mountain in Majorca, but quite a hilly area. And they sort of had an area that would deviate the water going down, and of course there was just so much water that it completely overflowed and just got out of control. But there's also people saying today that a lot of the houses had been built where the natural path of the water should be. Do you know what I mean? So again, we go back to the urban planning.
I think it's a typical thing everywhere you go now. The same thing's happened in my hometown back in the UK. They just started building on the floodplain. Well, when you build houses on the floodplain of a river, it's going to get flooded. It's a floodplain.
Well, that's it.
It's typical. And I think it's something that not only the builders need to think about, but people buying houses, they need to sort of have a look around.
Look around first,
make sure that the houses are built in an adequate place.
Because they will sell you a house in fairly dodgy places. I mean, I remember down in Malaga once, the part of Malaga that I used to go to, there were these mountains behind it, and they have these, sort of like, what would you say? Sort of like, it's not really a river, like it's a dry riverbed, but it's where all the water comes down and goes out into the ocean. And people actually build in those, thinking that it's not, So when those flash floods do happen, their houses and the chiringuitos and all of those things in Malaga get destroyed. And they also like to build a lot of those, what they call here the paseo marítimo, the what are they called, like
coastal roads, coastal
walk
walks,
or something, and a lot of the times they build them, and that also blocks the access, that blocks the water getting into the ocean as well, and you get some terrible flooding down there as well. So quite common to see this happen nowadays. And again, as you said, it's just basically people building where they shouldn't be building.
Yeah, I mean, I think nowadays I think people have got cottoned onto it a bit, and people have started realising that natural erosion takes place as well. So if you build too close to the seafront, you're going to get a period of time where you're fine, and then all of a sudden you notice that you're getting closer and closer to the seafront in some areas.
Absolutely,
that's happened on the coast of the UK for decades now, where some houses that have been built right near cliff edges have literally gone over the top of the cliff. But here in Spain, I don't think it was too much of a problem until there was a big boom in the construction industry, probably around the 80s actually, when things just started taking off, and that was when you saw just Benidorm explode. Majorca just became a big construction site. I remember going there in the 80s, and there was buildings everywhere. And now you see the result of that. There's just a huge increase in the amount of buildings that just didn't exist before. And unfortunately, some of them have been built on land that's just a little bit too close to rivers and to the seafront.
Yeah, it's a complicated thing. So you got to be careful when you're thinking about buying property. Have a look and see if there's any potential risks. Not only here, but anywhere nowadays. That's right. Now, we'll look at a couple of the comments that we got last week, John. We got one from a guy called Dystopian, who says that we always seem to agree with each other. We don't argue enough, I think was the point, which I think was the point that he was getting to. The point, I don't think we're here to argue with each other, are we? I mean, we talk about topics that we seem to share opinions. I mean, that's fairly common nowadays, that you find somebody that you do share an opinion with, right?
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about our experience in Spain.
That's it.
So
we're not talking about politics or anything, are we?
Exactly. Don't want to talk about politics either. But yeah, you're talking about your experiences in Australia, and my experience as someone who's just come a shorter distance away, being British. And obviously you've got slight different experiences to me. You're a lot further away from your family, and there are a few differences, but in the end of the day, we're both immigrants. We've both come from other countries here.
Immigrants or expats?
They're both the same thing, aren't they? I think. I mean, this thing that people have got about calling themselves expats, you're basically an immigrant. People try to make a difference between the two words, but really they're the same thing. The only difference that people try to push is that expats are people that don't need to leave their country, but they've chosen to leave the country to go somewhere else and try something different. Yeah. And they have enough money to support themselves, and they have a way and a means of going into a country without asking for help. Whereas immigrants come here not necessarily with any money. They're leaving their country to try and get away from a worse way of life, different conditions. I don't necessarily agree with that, but that's how people try and explain it. If you've left your country and you've gone to another country, you're an immigrant. End of story. I don't think there's a need for two different words, really.
Well, I think the word expat was coined more so for people that were sent to another country on business, maybe long-term business. and you get these expat communities, and there's a big, there's expat services, relocation services, special schools for expats, and all of those things, of course, with those multinational companies. I've really never considered myself an expat, I suppose. I didn't come here with that objective. I came here basically because I met a girl, and this is where we ended up. And I've gone through the immigration process to be able to live here. A little bit different for you coming from the UK because you've got that freedom of movement, or at least you did have. But I had to go through the immigration process like everybody else, and I was standing in queues, getting to places at 6 o'clock in the morning, which is what you seem to do here in Madrid to get your paperwork sorted out. Standing in queues for a long time, trying to get all of the bureaucratic things taken care of, hiring the gestores that we spoke about last week, these middle people that do all of that type of stuff for you. And back in the mid-90s, Spain went through an immigration boom, and I remember having to go through that as well at that period of time. And the queues were a nightmare, and some of the things that you had to do. I mean, you didn't have to go through that, did you?
Not what you had to, but I did have to go to the offices to deal with my paperwork as well, because although we have the freedom of movement, I still need to register as a resident here in Spain. That had to be renewed every 5 years. So after the first 5 years, they basically look at you as a permanent resident.
Yep.
So once I've been here for I'd been here for 5 years. I changed my residency to what was a permanent resident, which was basically an A4 green sheet of paper, and that doesn't have an expiry date on it.
So you don't get the little plastic card with your photo on it?
No, apparently that was some British lawyers in Malaga or down that way basically said that we were having our human rights,
civil rights.
Well,
human rights. Did they say?
Yeah, I've heard some very strange stories about this. I don't know how true they are. Someone said it was human rights. I don't quite understand how that could be infringing your human rights. But
I think it's the
maybe civil rights.
No, I think it's the civil liberties thing because.
Maybe.
Because in Australia, and I think the UK is almost exactly the same, that we don't actually have like an official document that they have here, right? So here every Spaniard is controlled by a number.
Yep.
And a little card with their fingerprint on it as well, I think.
Yeah,
and
well, I don't know if your fingerprint on it. I know they take your fingerprint, but I don't know if that's just linked
I don't know where it's on. I know it's on my card.
Yeah.
So in Australia, for example, we don't have that. In fact, if you don't want to exist, basically you don't exist. You don't have to have a driver's license. You don't have to have a passport. You don't have to have anything, I don't think. All you have is a birth certificate, and that's one of the main sources of ID that you still get asked for, and like a proof of address and all of those things.
Yeah.
Whereas here it's all a card system, and they've got a lot of detail about people's lives, and I think that's the aspect that those British lawyers were going into.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, you're living in someone else's country, so if they want you to have a card, you have a card. I mean, surely you've got to adapt your life to the life and the laws of Spain, not start taking them to court because of your civil rights and stuff. I think, and at the end of the day, the cards are really useful. I mean,
but here they are because they ask you for your ID everywhere you go. Now, not so much because you've got a pin on your credit card, but I remember that there was a time there where you got asked for your ID card every day of your life. And I had a friend from Holland who just used to have this big piece of paper.
Same as me. I've still got it. Yeah,
that's it. And it was all crumpled up and it was completely destroyed because he had to show this thing every time he wanted to buy something in a supermarket with a credit card, basically, or get anything done. You have to prove these things. In that sense, there's a big difference. Another thing that I notice here, John, is that when, like, for example, with kids, for example, if you put them into a sporting club, you always have to give the copies of the parents' ID as well. So they're really strict on that type of thing. I can understand that, really.
Yeah, the numbers used for everything. You don't necessarily always have to show your card when you're doing that sort of documentation. Often you just need to write down your NI number. But the thing is with a card, if you do anything like go to the post office to pick up a parcel, I went to the post office actually the day before yesterday to pick up this new sticker that we have to put on all the cars now about the.
Did it cost you €4?
€5. €5,
okay.
yeah. And I had to show my NI number there as well.
Yeah.
The NI number basically stands for National Identity of Extranjero, which is foreigner, basically.
Yeah.
And you have to show it there. If you even something as silly as the season ticket for the theme parks here. We've got a few theme parks in Madrid, some animal parks and things, and you can get a yearly season ticket for it, which are called bono. And in theory, when you go to the park and you have your card, and you show your card with your photo on it as well, by the way, to go in.
So that's
in theory,
photo ID.
That's photo ID. Yeah. Well, in theory, if they want to, they can ask you for your ID card.
Yeah.
And if you don't have it, they don't have to let you in.
Well,
it's crazy. It's crazy.
Again, with the PIN identification number on what you have with your credit card or your debit card, I've had arguments at supermarkets saying, "Well, what do you want to see my ID card for when I've got a PIN?"
Yeah.
Because I mean that's fairly high security, right? I mean, I'm sure that if you had to sign like you used to in the old days, maybe you have to show your ID card as well. But the PIN is a fairly good security measure, I think.
I think that's kind of disappearing now. I don't think I've
PIN?
I don't think I've been asked.
No,
ID.
it's gone. But when it first came in,
when it first came in, I think it was just.
They were slow to react.
Yeah, I think it was just a case of people were so used to the previous system. I don't even think it was the companies making the employees go through the process. I think it was just the employees hadn't been told otherwise, and they were still asking for the ID cards. But I mean, now, you go to the supermarket now and you give your card over, and you don't even have to put the PIN in. It's all touch cards. So
I'll tell you another thing that is difficult to get used to is the concept that they have here of the segundo apellido.
Yeah.
Now, I don't have one.
No, I don't.
I have a middle name.
Yeah.
Right? Do you have a middle name?
I have a middle name, but that doesn't exist in Spain.
No. The middle name doesn't exist. But
exactly.
Spanish people think that's your first surname a lot of the time, right?
Or they think it's your second first name.
I don't know. It just gets too complicated. Then when you try to explain this to people that perhaps haven't travelled, or Spanish people that haven't gone overseas or lived in another foreign country, they can't get their head around the fact that somebody doesn't have a second surname. And it can be a bit of a nightmare when you're filling out forms.
Yeah, I think most of the forms on official places, anything governmental now, and most big companies, it does say second surname if applicable on there now. But I remember a few times having to explain I don't have a second surname. And they're like, what's this Simon thing? I'm like, that's my middle name. And they're like, what do you mean, what's a middle name? I said, well, like you're Jose Maria, but everyone calls you Jose. Well, my name is Jonathan, and then I have a middle name which is Simon. Oh, so you're Jonathan Simon? I said no, I'm not, and then you had to explain all that. No, I'm not Jonathan Simon. I'm Jonathan.
Yeah, well,
John.
I mean, the concept of the middle name, as we said, it doesn't exist. So it's a bit complicated, but those are the things that we have to come up against living in this country. Now, so that's it. Now, there was another comment here just quickly. I'll see if I can find it. I might have lost it here. Let me see if I can find it. All right, here we go. It says, replying to one of the things that we spoke about, I think 2 weeks ago, about the whether €3,500 was enough to live well in Malaga. One guy wrote back here saying, is the standard of living getting better? Now, I've never really felt that I've had a bad standard of living here in Spain, I don't think. I mean, normally I can do everything that I need to do with the money that I make.
Yeah.
Is he talking about quality of life, standard of living, or the cost of living? I don't really know. But standard of living, I think, is okay, right?
I think in Spain, the standard of living is good if you're earning a decent amount of money. Okay, I think the standard of living is probably worse when you're stuck in this €800 a month job.
Yeah.
So, I mean, my standard of living has improved enormously from the time when I first came to Spain. Because I've been able to,
which it normally does because you were young when you came
exactly,
here. So
I'm living
that's
in a
what we
nicer
expect.
place now. I'm living in a nicer town now as well, and of course my standard of living has improved. But I think in general, Spain is a good place to live. It's a nice place to live. There are some issues. There's things I dislike about Spain when it comes down to sort of every day or every year. Things. So the bureaucracy is awful. The red tape, just, as you say, queues to go into places and renewing your driving license or anything like that. That can be a complete nightmare, and it's something I do dislike. But that's just part of living here. You just got to get used to it, and you just knuckle down and get on with it.
Yeah. I've got the definition here, standard of living from Cambridge Dictionary. It says the amount of money and comfort people have in a particular society. Okay, so maybe we could argue that it's a little bit unequal, maybe. The haves and the have-nots, as they say. There are a lot of people that seem to live better than others, or at least you get that impression a lot of the times, or you hear that a lot, right? That the people that are not able to access the labour market, big problem, obviously.
Yeah.
You're not able to get a decent salary. You're not able to emancipate from your parents' home. Is another problem that people have here. But
big problem.
But what I've found is I've never really that's never really affected me.
No, I mean I haven't been affected by that at all, really.
And neither your girlfriend or your wife, who is also born and bred here.
Yeah, I mean we were quite lucky. I mean the years that we probably would have had a lower standard of living at the beginning, we were in Majorca and we were doing something completely different. We had accommodation provided for us because of the job we were doing. And then when we came to Madrid, we just had to put up with about maybe 4 years of living in some shabby, very small accommodation and stuff. Which, I mean, that's expected. I think you expect that to do that anywhere.
Yeah, well,
in the UK, I remember living in a flat when I was 19 years old. I'd moved out of my parents' house. No, I actually moved to another city. When every time I got promoted, I had to go to a different bowling centre. I ended up in Bristol. I wasn't earning a massive amount of money at the time because I was still training to be deputy manager, and all I could afford really was just this small little flat. And I didn't have any friends in Bristol. I grew up in the middle of England, and I found this tiny little flat. Had one bedroom. It was fine, little lounge and stuff, little kitchen. It was fine, but there was a hole in the floor of the kitchen.
Yeah, because
the furniture was really, really grotty. And
because you don't need those comforts, I suppose, because you're young and you're willing to put up with different things. And I mean that's the point that we made a couple of weeks ago as well. That you hope that your standard of living does improve the older you get. Maybe it is a problem for a lot of Spanish youth that they struggle to get, as I said, access to the labour market, get decent jobs, but I think I've been able to avoid that because there's always been demand for what I do, and that's what you're finding at the moment. I mean, your phone probably never stops ringing this time of the year, people looking to try to get English classes. So as long as that continues, you should be able to live fairly well and have a good quality of life standard of living, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fine. I've got plenty of work going on and I can't complain.
Pay the bills.
Exactly. And if there's any point where I'm not really getting enough work, I'll go out and find something else that I can do just to keep going. But I think one of the problems, it's not a Spanish problem. I think it's a problem in most of the world now. A lot of younger people, I'm not saying all of them, I'm not trying to generalise.
They expect things.
They've got this idea that they're entitled. It's this idea of entitlement. They're entitled to.
But is that different? Is that different from when we were that age as well? Though? No. I mean, I don't know. I mean,
on my case, it was very different. I mean, I grew up when I was 13. My dad turned around to me and said, "Right, there's 4 kids. You've got two brothers and a sister. I'm not going to pay you pocket money. When you're 13, you can go and get a paper round. You want money, you go and earn it." And that was it. No pocket money or anything like that. I only had 50p a week before that anyway. But no pocket money. as soon as I was 13, went out, got 3 paper rounds, did 3 paper rounds a week until I was 15. When you're 15, you're old enough to work in a supermarket. So I went out and got a job, started the day before I was 15 actually, working 3 nights a week in a supermarket. And I think that helped me unbelievably, really. I learned the value of money, respect for the things that I want and what I bought. I didn't.
What you're saying is
take anything for granted.
So what you're saying is that doesn't happen now, you reckon?
It happens a lot less now. I go back to the UK, and a lot of teenagers they're walking around with iPhones.
You think that kids expect to have an iPhone nowadays, John?
Well, yeah, you see these kids walking around the street with an iPhone, and they haven't gone out and earned it. I mean, some of them are 15. They haven't gone out and earned it. I mean, I know for a fact. Obviously, I've got friends and family that have got teenagers, and they're walking around with iPhones, cost £600, and they've been given it for Christmas. And you think, blimey, that's a good Christmas present. But not only have they got that for Christmas, they've also got clothes, and they've got other things. They're getting an awful lot of things given to them.
So it goes back to the old debate that we as parents, we're not maybe raising our kids as well as we should be doing in that sense, right? Teaching them financial responsibility and all of those things, and you got to earn your money. I mean, that's a debate for another day. But I mean, that's it. I have heard here a lot as well that a lot of young people that they pop up on the forums saying that we can't afford to buy a house. Well, maybe you've got to rent for a little while, or maybe you've got to do what you got to do.
Start at the beginning.
That's right.
Work your way up.
I mean, start a business if you need to get something going on. I don't know. I mean, But
again, I think Spain is still very different compared to back home. Because,
more traditional in that sense.
It is more traditional. But I think one of the problems is the labour laws here.
They're very rigid.
Very rigid labour laws, and I think there's a big problem with the younger people in society being able to get a part-time job and get their foot into a position where they can support themselves and buy their own things.
Yeah, well, the part-time job concept basically doesn't exist.
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't exist, no.
People that work Monday to Friday are also working the weekends, which is where I think they've made a big mistake with the labour laws.
It's not flexible because, people have to, they don't have that concept of just being able to work Saturday morning from 9 to 1.
Yeah. And there's a lot of people that are very much against Sunday opening hours here in Spain. And when you sort of look at it from their point of view, you think, oh God, they've got a point. Sunday should be a time where people can actually have some time off and have time with family. But if you look at the difference between what happens in the UK and what happens here, people that work at weekends, the majority of them are people that want to work weekends, or they're students.
Have you got Sunday trading in the UK though?
We have Sunday trading, but they're restricted trading hours.
Okay.
So, for example, the shopping centre in my hometown open from 11 till 6.
And probably I don't know this, but there'd probably be penalty rates if you work on a Sunday, would there? I mean, meaning that you earn more money, double time and a half.
I don't know if that's still the same.
I know that I think in Australia that still exists.
It still it definitely existed when I was younger. If I worked on a Sunday, I was given time and a half, so 50% extra on the paycheck. And if it was a bank holiday, it was always double time.
Yeah. So you reckon that's gone now?
I don't know if that's the same, whether they've adjusted it, or if it is part of the law, or if it's just optional. I don't know how that's worked in England now, because I've been out of the country for 20 years now, so that may well have changed.
Yeah.
But it was definitely a thing back then, and it's something that should happen now.
Whereas here, I don't think it exists to the same extent. And that other point also is that I remember when I went to the UK a few years ago, I can't remember what I was doing there. It might have been a cricket tournament or something, but I went into even supermarkets in some places, and you see older people, like people that are retired or 60, 62 or 63, working. You don't see that here at all, do you? If you go to the local supermarket, you don't see a lot of people over the age of 45 working.
Not really. Not in this. I've never really noticed it before. I mean, now you mention it, I don't think I've really seen many older people working in supermarkets. But
here or in the UK?
No, here. In the UK is quite normal.
Yeah, well, and I remember when I went home as well, there was sort of like you go to a big W that's like a type of department store thing. You see, people over the age of 50 still working, and here they seem to get pushed out of the labour market for some reason,
I've got to admit, here, if you lose a job when you're in your 50s,
you're gone.
You're going to struggle to find a new job. From experience of family members, from my wife and things, I remember them telling me that it's very difficult to get back into the labour market if you lose your job when you're in your 50s. People don't want to hire you; they want younger people. And
well, there's demand. Probably there's a lot of youth in demand. But anyway. Yeah. All right, now we'll look at the final thing here, moving off the standard of living thing. And there's a British concert pianist called James Rhodes. Have you heard of this bloke?
It rings a bell, but it's not someone.
Well, apparently he lives in Madrid now.
Okay.
He's decided to leave the UK and come over and live in Madrid. And quoting him here, he says, "I have no reason to lie when I tell you that everything is better in Spain." Everything, he says. Yeah. So he calls Madrid and not the UK home. Now, would you agree or disagree with Mr. Rhodes that everything is better in Spain?
No. I don't think you could say everything is better in any country. There's so many conflicting things in either country, and some things that work in one country can't work in another country for various reasons. I would never say everything is better in Spain. In fact, personally, I'm very 50-50 when it comes to which country would be the better place to live. It depends on your point of view.
Yeah, it does, yeah. Depends on what you're doing. It depends on a lot of things.
If you love the sunshine, if you love the heat, Spain's a fantastic place to live. If you're not that keen on the heat, or if the heat restricts you from doing activities that you like doing, which is in my case, it becomes more of a hindrance than a plus point. So that's just the weather. There's obviously a lot of other things that you can discuss about the differences between your home country and the country you've adopted. Always comes down to experience, personal points of view.
Well, he was talking about I think he said here that there's a fantastic cultural offer in a city like Madrid and in Spain in general. He mentions a couple of other things about how the neighbours don't complain when he's playing his piano late at night or early in the morning. He says there are some problems, of course, but they're secondary to the standard of living, quality of life aspect in his regard. I suppose I don't want to be too critical of James Rhodes, but I suppose he's a world-renowned concert pianist, so he could probably live anywhere. But he's chosen to live in Madrid. And I went to the comments section of this article. This was published maybe a couple of months ago, and it says, "I have no reason to lie when I tell you that not everything is better in Spain. Shame on El País for publishing such an unbalanced, poorly written article from an author who clearly has a limited vocabulary and an agenda." So saying he's got an agenda there. And somebody else, a Spanish guy living in the UK, says, "I've done the opposite journey being a Spaniard living in the UK. Although I too would love to live in Spain rather than in England, logically, it hurts me to admit that everything is not better in Spain. It's a wonderful and magnificent country that unfortunately has been ruined by political and economic factors and agents." And at the end of the day, that's what it comes down to. We can talk about the job market. We can talk about the politics in this country, all of the scandals that have happened over the years. But the one thing that I don't think that Spain is better than, let's say, Australia, the UK, wherever, is the opportunity side.
Opportunities, especially labour opportunities.
Yeah, that's what I'm going about. Yeah,
that's definitely a big stumbling block for younger people here.
The job market basically here it sucks.
It does. What's the latest? I think 20-something% unemployment.
Still, it just can't. It just doesn't go down.
Just doesn't seem to go down. 20% unemployment, and that is a big percentage of unemployed.
Yeah.
But not only that, it's as a young person in Spain, you find lots of like roadblocks wherever you go, trying to find a decent job. I mean, you can get your foot in the door and get into basic positions, yes. But even with experience, if you're only 25, you've got lots of experience doing a specific job. You're only 25. They look at you, you're only 25. They don't look at your experience. They don't look at your qualifications. They look at your age. And that's been something that I saw right from the beginning when I got here, from friends, from my wife, and from my own personal experience as well. And it's something that I never really encountered in the UK. And as I said, when I was in England, 21 years old, and I was the general manager of a bowling centre. I mean, that would be impossible here.
Well, there's not many bowling centres to begin with.
Well, that's for start, right? But in general, I mean...
No, I know what you mean. I know what you mean, yeah. You wouldn't find a 21-year-old shopping centre manager, for example, or 22, let's say. Let's be, even 23 or 24, where you probably could see that in other places. But not here, no. So that's probably the biggest downside. Luckily, I mentioned it just before that when you do teach English, and obviously it's not the best profession in the world, if you can call it a profession, but at least there's supply and demand, and you're able to more or less work the hours that you want. You can, make a decent salary in comparison with a lot of people, and But if you want to go into that mainstream Spanish job market, I always say in these videos here, think seriously before you do it.
Yeah, I think you need to know what you're getting into before you come over, and you need to look at the job market on your specific field of study, or what you're actually working at the moment in the UK or anywhere else for that matter. And so when I first came over to Majorca, I had a job prepared already before I got to Majorca, so I was fine. I didn't really look at the job market. But when I met my wife, obviously, we decided to move back to Madrid. And when I got here, I then had to look at jobs. Well, I mean, I spent years working in the bowling centres. There was like 3 bowling centres here. They were run completely differently.
Yeah.
Different concept as well. It was just a completely different kettle of fish. There was no job opportunity there at all. And if they look at you, you're 26 years old. They're like, you can be a lane marshal if you like. You can hand out shoes, but you're not going to get a management job here.
And starting a business also, it's not easy either. It's a difficult market to get into. Yeah.
Well, I think the self-employment laws here make the...
well, that's again, we can spend an hour talking about that. Yeah, well, the Spanish have an expression which is, I think, if if I don't get it 100% correct, justo por pecadores. So have you heard that expression?
No, I haven't actually.
People that do things correctly,
pay
because of all of the people that have done things incorrectly in the past. And that you do see those things. I mean, these sayings exist because sometimes it is the character, but the labour market you come up against abuses in the labour market every day. Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't want to put anyone off coming to Spain from what we're saying. I mean, the lesson to be learned here is before you come over, explore the possibilities, explore the opportunities, look at the labour market in the area you're wishing to go to before you come, to make sure that you can do what you want to do and what you're planning on doing before you get here. That's the key. Make sure you're prepared. And if there's a possibility that you're not going to be able to get into the same field as what you're hoping to, have a plan B. What are you going to do? Where are you going to go to look for a job? What sort of job are you going to look for? Are those jobs available where you're going?
Yeah.
Have a plan B. Not everything's the same. Everyone's the same. there are companies that treat their employees absolutely fantastically, and then you get others that just take the mickey all the time. So it sort of swings and roundabouts. But I have to admit, from experience here, the companies, especially the bigger companies, they can take the mickey quite a bit with the employees. They treat them quite badly when it comes down to wages and hours.
Stress,
stress.
Yeah, especially if you want to work for those big, one of the big 35 companies here in Spain. Yeah, that's it. So we'll wrap it up there for today, John. I think we didn't get through a lot of topics, but we've been going for 40 minutes, so it's a fair crack today anyway. We've got to move on. I've got to go off and give some English classes, and I'm sure you have to do the same thing. So I'll say goodbye. Thanks for your participation again this week, John.
No problem. I'll see you again next week.
You will. Questions and comments, leave them in the section below. Give the video a thumbs up if you liked it. Don't be shy. Please send your comments. We don't care if they're positive, if they're negative, if they're critical. If they're nice, we'll probably reply sooner than we will to the other ones. But don't be shy. Leave your questions and comments in the section below. We'll see you in the next podcast or vlogcast. And don't forget, you can listen on iTunes, all of the major podcasting platforms, as well as YouTube. So, hasta luego.